how can you become indistractable and have huge amounts of focus? I have read dozens of books on focus. I've written my own book on focus, The Magic of Focus, and explored this topic over and over again. My podcast, The Focus Bee Show, company, The Focus Bee. I love focus, and in this episode, we're going to explore 5 different ways and different tools that you can implement that will help you to totally, radically boost your levels of focus. Hi, I'm Katie, high performance coach, speaker, and podcaster on a mission to support high achievers to lead a life of alignment, purpose, and joy. The first thing to understand about focus is what do you actually want to focus on and what is actually a distraction. If we think of focus and distraction as 2 opposite pillars, how do you know which activities are in the focus part and which ones are actually a distraction? You might think this is obvious. You might think, well, obviously social media is a distraction. Now that depends. If you're working as a marketing manager and you spend your day on social media for your work, that's your focus. This is a key point that Nir Eyal makes in his book Indistractable, and that is that we've got traction and distraction. Traction is what you intentionally want to place your attention on, and distraction is not, the opposite. So focus is really down to traction activities, and it really comes down to what you want to be placing your attention on. So it comes down to intention. This is the bottom line. To become indistractable and to have high levels of focus, it all begins with intention and commitment. So you first need to ask yourself, what is it in this moment that you want to be doing? So let's take a situation. You're at work, you're right first thing in the morning, you sit down, you think, okay, what do I want to focus on now? Because without that clarity, of course, you get distracted. Of course, you check the emails and Slack and social media and WhatsApp because you haven't even asked yourself to begin with what you wanted to focus on. This is where it all begins. So that's the very first step, and that is to look at what is it that you want to place your focus on? What would be your core traction activities? That sounds easy, but in practice, it does require a bit of pausing. It can help, for instance, to use a tool that David Allen talks about, which is capture, to have a place where you have all your different projects, maybe quickly go through it and think, okay, out of all these different projects, what could be my main focus object today or for this most important task first thing in the morning, right? As Brian Tracy says, eat that frog. You want to begin the day by consuming the most important part of your work, so by doing a most productive task. This will help you to select that traction object, that focus object. So that's the first step, intention and choosing what you want to focus on. Then we want to look at how you can stay in that level of focus. The obvious step, and that's step 2, is to shut down all possible distractions. So you put your phone in play mode, you put it in another room, you turn off all your notifications, you switch off Slack, switch off the emails, and then you do one of the rules of deep work that Newport talks about, which is embrace boredom. And I think that really is the second step. Once you've turned off all your notifications, you've put away all possible distractions, you need to have the ability and grow the ability to embrace that feeling of boredom and resistance. Every single time you will start deep work, which is focus, single task, traction type activities, you will experience some resistance, some wanting to check and do other things. And that's because your brain wants to save and gain energy. And it is quite energy demanding to do deep work. And so your brain just wants to do the quick, easy things. But the more you practice staying with that feeling and doing the work, the better you will get at it. So this is where techniques like, and this will be tip number 3, this is where techniques like the Pomodoro can help you. Put an alarm on for half an hour and you think, in that moment, I will only do deep work and I won't do anything else. I will only single task. Multitasking destroys the brain. It is terrible for you. Literally, there are studies that show that, I think it's the anterior cingulate cortex. Anyway, a part of the brain shrinks while we multitask. It's terrible for your brain, your attention, your energy levels. So we really want to avoid multitasking and just single task. So when you start applying the Pomodoro at the beginning, if you're not used to focused work or deep work, do 15 minutes, 20 minutes, then half an hour. And over time, you should be able to do about 90 minutes. So a full cycle of 90 minutes of just deep work, single tasking, one activity. Something really magical will happen when you do this, which is you will get into flow. So this is the fourth hack, which is get yourself in that state of flow, because it is our most high performing state. This is when we feel the most fulfilled. We're 5 times more productive. And in his book, Flow, Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi explains that this is really where we thrive the most. It's the optimal experience. So you want to get yourself in this state of flow. Now, how do you do that? Well, you could look at it as it's a perfect balance between challenge and skills. So the activities that get you most into flow are when the skills are matched with the challenge. So the challenge that you're taking on is something that you feel that you have the skills to do, and then this is in your flow zone. But the truth is, you can get into flow even with a really boring small task. How? By having a deadline, making it fast, putting on maybe a bit of music in the background. You can get yourself into flow by just single tasking. Single tasking is the key, so focusing is the key to getting into flow. And that's a really high level of productivity, a really high level of performance. So that was tip number 4. And lastly, tip number 5, take breaks. We have this ultradian rhythm where we can focus for maybe 90-minute cycles, and then we need a 10-20 minute ideally break. If we don't do this, our attention and our attentional space reduces, and we find it then difficult to work another 90 minutes straight and be focused, because we're not meant to focus all day long like crazy. Actually, Newport, again in deep work, he says that we probably have 4 hours, maybe 5 hours of deep work max, and the rest you can do small tasks, you can do communication, meetings, but for all the deep focused work, we only have 4 or 5 hours. To optimize these, you need to take breaks. And when I talk about breaks, I don't just mean going off your PC and quickly answering a few messages on your phone. This won't help you. These aren't real breaks. We need breaks away from technology, because if you're still on your phone or watching TV or listening to a podcast, it's still a lot of information for your brain to process, and this isn't a real break. So we want a proper break, going for a walk, having a glass of water, walking a bit around, brain dumping a few things on a piece of paper, and this will then help you to rebuild your focus, rebuild your attention, so that then when you want to start your next focus cycle, it will be easier for you. Let's recap. What have we explored today? So we've looked at how focus really comes down to being intentional, having these traction-like activities, and being really clear before you begin working what's important for you. Then we've looked at turning off all notifications and embracing boredom, because when you embrace boredom, then you can get into that single tasking and into that focus. Then we've looked at how it's really important to then, once you've turned off all notifications, single task, and embraced boredom, then we looked at using Pomodoro. So you fix yourself an amount of time during which you will only single task and do that activity. Lastly, we looked at 2 other things, which is flow, being in that state of flow where everything merges, time disappears, you're one with that activity. It's an amazing feeling, and people don't have it enough nowadays because they're constantly distracted, doing other things, being interrupted. But if you're able to single task and just do that activity, you will get into flow. And the last part was remember to take breaks. Respect your ultradian rhythm and take breaks. Last couple of tips before we go. You can use apps such as Freedom and Cold Turkey on the PC, and there's a bunch of different apps you can use to block all the softwares that's distracting for you on your computer or on your phone. This can be an extra little hack though ideally you want to be able to build that focus and discipline muscle and train yourself to do it. But if you're really struggling, that can be really nice to begin with. Logging out of your social media can also add a bit of friction. So there's a few other little tricks that you can add that can help you. I hope this has been useful for you. If you're not signed up yet or subscribed, please tune in to the podcast, subscribe to the YouTube channel, write in the comments what was your main takeaway, what actions are you going to put in place, and feel free to ask me any questions. I always look at all the comments. I'll answer all the questions personally myself. Absolutely passionate about focus. I'd be happy to help. And tune in and check this last video that I did where I talk about how we can be more in our creative mode and lead a little more an intentional life. I think this really goes hand in hand with our ability to focus. Thank you for tuning in.